Rubens is 100%, he controls everything. And that's where I really learned about how to use color. So the title of the exhibition, Layers of Air, Sticks in Time, was a collaboration between myself and Charles Moore, the curator, and we decided on it because we needed the layers of air. I mean, the works are very layered in themselves, so it was, we needed something, and we decided on layering air because it was very ephemeral, right? I mean, what is a layer of air? But it's, and then the sticks in time was sort of like denoting the sharp bits in the painting. So the layers and the time, I think, are honestly like this how the paintings are made, and air and sticks are something, you know, that I think, I mean, obviously they're like important to me, but it's like growing up in the woods, you know, it's like sticks are around. Like I would make forts with them, and they were, you know, just sort of like a part of everyday life for me. Well, my mother's a painter, so growing up in her studio and around her work, I think it was just a part of me, and so it's always been a part of me. And there was a period of time where I decided to actively stop painting in my life, but then I was drawn back into it. This was in our house in Connecticut. So her studio was above the garage, and actually for a while it was in the attic of our house. And so I would go up there and play with like colored pencils and like craypas or like oil sticks, and you know, just sort of be drawing by myself like on paper and sorts of things like that. Yeah, and then I think even before that it was like markers and crayons and watercolor, and my mom would just set me up, you know, at my little table. Yeah. So yeah, MICA was where I did my undergrad in Baltimore, and that was a very essential education. It was very much very painting driven, and so all the classes that I took was either drawing or painting, and I think that really helped me get my work ethic down, and it was quite rigorous. And then it was after graduating where I took the break from painting and I did other things, and then when I came to New York and I went to Hunter College, I got back into that rigor. I was sort of reminded, I was like, right, I need to be, this is a very big part of me that I need to be like fleshing out and putting more effort into. So I think both educations sort of helped to steer me in important ways that I would have not otherwise, you know, been privy to. I mean, I liked all of them. They were all amazing, absolutely amazing experiences. And I think being in another place that you are not familiar with and then making work there. I mean, because of the way I work so intuitively, it's almost like the land kind of just bubbles up and comes out in the work. So the work changes, but although it's not conscious, I think, so being in Bulgaria, I did end up painting lots of paintings of donkeys and cows because we were in a very rural part of the country. And so I would take sort of long walks throughout the village and in the forest, and then I'd go back to the studio and just begin drawing, and you know, all these like images of donkeys would just start coming up. And then in Finland, that was also a very interesting experience because the landscape was very, very flat and very, very cold and very dark. And that was much more of sort of an interior experience. Very cozy, and the work that I was making there was mostly drawing on paper. You know, it was in the middle of the woods, so it was very influenced also by like the forest that was around and the other people that were in the residency who became good friends of mine. And I think just the sort of culture that like one takes in when you're traveling. My artistic journey has been sort of very cyclical and also all over the place. I often look to language to inspire myself for working, and so the string and cardboard. I mean, it's really funny that you bring this up because I'm looking at these paintings now, and I can absolutely see like string and cardboard in them when I'm looking at them because I use very wide brushes and also very teeny skinny brushes, and I think it's the trying to get a language out of whatever medium it is that you're using, and sort of the language sort of continues along with wherever you are in the cycle. So I would definitely say that that's for sure influencing my work now. When I was painting figuratively, I mean, for me, painting has always been about making the mark on the canvas. And when I was painting figuratively, it's almost like I was trying to say something that was very internal. And I was also really trying to use different brushes and like trying to make the figures in different ways of painting. The figure ended up disappearing from my work. It sort of became sort of broken up in some places and sort of collagey like, and then I really sort of dove wholeheartedly into abstraction, and that's when I felt like I could really sort of say what I had been trying to say the whole time. Because I felt like I've had such a wide variety of painting. I mean, and like the use of cardboard and string and those big installations, and then the figurative work. Painting at one point became very overwhelming for me. That's when I actually decided to stop painting because it was almost just too much, and I was like, there's other things to do, like better ways to make a living. And so then I moved to New York, and my first job was I actually was working for Jeff Koons, and that's really what got me back into painting. And that's where I really learned about how to use color, because I started out as a color mixer, and it's so specific. And I was like, because from the abstract painting that I had come from, I was like, this is painting in an entirely different way, and where the colors are extremely thought out beforehand. And that's a huge part of the process of working there. So I began to really explore color more in depth than I ever had, and that took an extremely long time. That's what I was doing while I was at Hunter. And I chose the 6 colors that I'm working with now because these are the 6 that I have found to have the widest value range. They're also a bit transparent, so you can make the same yellow can be a very deep yellow and also a very, very, very pale yellow. So it's sort of, I have to have a bit of a limited palette to escape this feeling of overwhelm from all of the colors and all of the things that like paint can be. So titanium white, cold black, quinacridone magenta, phthalocyanine blue, alizarin yellow, and alizarin orange. Yeah, and I would say underneath that question is the question of like control, right? It's always like almost a dance or a battle or however you want to see it with the paint, and it's like, am I in control or is the paint in control? And I've had to come to this place where it's almost like when I'm making the paintings, it's like I can't really be present for it in a way, because then I will have the control over the paint, but then I won't have control over the paint because it won't come out how I want it to. So, I mean, and Jeff Koons is 100%, he controls everything. So, I mean, that's his way of making work, which makes it actually much more conceptual. So I did learn a lot about color in that way, for sure. And I learned that I cannot work that way. I would say actually quite a bit, and I think that the texture comes mostly from the surface of the painting, the linen that I use. Linen is such a beautiful fabric and material to work on, for many reasons, but mostly because you can sort of see the warp and the weft through it, And I often find that when I'm making the paintings, I do brush strokes horizontally and then brush strokes vertically, and it's almost like I'm trying to emulate the linen behind it in a way. So the linen sort of always is showing through, even in places where it's not. I don't necessarily think of it as light, but I do. I mean, lights, it's important for me to have very, very pale, bright points, and then in contrast with very, very dark points. And oftentimes these sort of end up right next to each other. I think that sort of helps with a possible light source in the paintings. I mean, because they're not representational paintings, I don't think I don't really ever think about there being a light source or an illusion of light at all, but it's more like, how do these colors look next to each other, and how do the warms and the cools like react when they're next to each other. I think titles are they're very important for me to have attached to the work, because it's almost like the extra step that you can offer to the viewer to understand. And I did grow up in the forest, and I think that was very, very influential for me. I spent a lot of time by myself in the woods, like looking in moss and swamps and under logs and stuff. And I think finding these little ecosystems to sort of really delve into, I think that really comes out in the individual works themselves. And I think so the titles are often, when I'm making the work, I work and work, and then I look away, and then I often go back and I work some more, and then I look away. And then when the painting is done, I mean, sometimes they take a long time, sometimes they take only a couple days. And then once I feel like the painting is finally singing, then I get to the task of titling it. And often I will be looking at the painting will bring up a memory for me from growing up in the woods. So this one is called Cathedral, and I titled it that because after I was finished with it, I looked at it and I said, oh my God, this absolutely reminds me of this spot in the forest where a big tree had blown over in a storm, and their whole root system was ripped out of the ground, and where the tree had been, it was dark, but now there was like a shaft of sunlight coming down and hitting this like beautiful root structure, and it looked like a cathedral. So that's where the title from this comes from. So that's how I come up with the titles. Yeah, I think what I mean by that is when I feel like there's a certain balance to it. I mean, it's always like we're always looking for equilibrium. I am personally in my life, and then also in my work. And I think for me, when the painting is singing, it's got the right mix of colors and the right amount of brush strokes, so that you can sort of look at it and then look at it again and then look at it again and begin to sort of get lost in it a little bit. I often will paint sort of very close up to the canvas and then sort of very far away from the canvas. And when I'm painting close up is sort of when I know it's like almost done, because I'm like looking at the individual like small spots on the canvas. And then often when I step back, then it can be singing. But oftentimes it's not, so then I have to go back in. I mean, and then you get into the whole control game, going back and forth. But I guess that's what I mean by when it's singing. I've been listening to a lot of Beyonce lately. Yep. Yeah, and then I listen to all types of music. I really like French techno. I really like jazz. I also do a lot of podcasts. I listen to grunge. I listen to classical music. I listen to sort of all sorts of things. What is important for me when making a painting is getting the scale, whether it's large or small. So I have to be able to, so when I have a large canvas, it takes much more energy, it's much more physical. And so when I'm working, I usually have several large canvases going, but also several small canvases going at the same time. So I have my little cart and I sort of push it around to each canvas that I'm working on. And when I need a break from being very physical with the large ones, I'll sit down and work on the small ones And then when I get tired of sitting, I go back to the large ones. So for me, they're kind of one and the same. You know, the large ones you need to walk back further from to be able to take in the whole thing. So when you are deciding when it's done, it's like you have to really be able to step back from it, like a good ways. The large ones are very fun. I really enjoy the large ones. This is my exhibition at Karis Gallery in collaboration with Annalene and Charles Moore, Layers of Air, Sticks in Time. Thank you for watching.